Did I ever tell you how lucky you are? By Dr Seuss. This book with love is for Phyllis the Jackson. When I was quite young and quite small for my size, I met an old man in the desert of Dries, and he sang me a song I will never forget. At least, well, I haven't forgotten it yet. He sat in a terribly prickly place, but he sang with a sweet sunny smile on his face. When you think things are bad, when you feel sour and blue, and when you start to get mad, you should do what I do. Just tell yourself, ducky, you're really quite lucky. Some people are much more, oh ever so much more, oh muchly much more unlucky than you. Be glad you don't work on the Bunglebung Bridge that they're building across Booba Bay at Bum Ridge. It's a troublesome world, all the people who are in it, are troubled with troubles almost every minute. You ought to be thankful the whole heaping lot for the places and people you're lucky you're not. Just suppose, for example, you lived in Garzate and got caught in that traffic on Zate Highway 8. Or suppose, just for instance, you lived in Gazaire with your bedroom up here and your bathroom up there. Just suppose you were poor Herbie Hart, who has taken his thromdimbulator apart. He never will get it together, I'm sure. He never will know if the gick or the gore fits into the scrux or the snux or the snore. Yes, ducky, you're lucky you're not Herbie Hart, who has taken his thromdimbulator apart. Think they work you too hard? Think of poor Ali Sard. He has to mow grass in his uncle's backyard, and it's quick-growing grass, and it mows as he grows as he mows it. The faster he mows it, the faster he grows it, and all that his stingy old uncle will pay for his shoving that mower around in that hay is the piffulous pay of 2 dukelers a day. And Ali can't live on such piffulous pay. So he has to paint flagpoles on Sundays in grooves. How lucky you are you don't live in his shoes. And poor Mr. Bix, every morning at 6, poor Mr. Bix has his boffin to fix. It doesn't seem fair, it just doesn't seem right. But his boffin just seems to go schlump every night. It schlumps in a heap, sadly needing repair. Bix figures it's due to the local night air. It takes him all day to unschlump it, and then the night air comes back and it schlumps once again. So don't you feel blue, don't get down in the dumps. You're lucky you don't have a boffin that schlumps. And while we're at it, consider the schlots, the crumple-horned, web-footed, green-bearded schlots, whose tail is entailed with insolvable knots. If he isn't muchly more worse off than you, I'll eat my umbrella. That's just what I'll do. And you're lucky indeed you don't ride on a camel. To ride on a camel you sit on a whammel. A whammel, you know, is sort of a saddle, held on by a button that's known as a faddle. And boy, if your old whammel faddle gets loose, I'm telling you, ducky, you're gone like a goose. And poor Mr. Potter, T-crosser, I-dotter, he has to cross T's and he has to dot I's in an I&T factory out in Van Nuys. Oh, the jobs people work at. Out west near Hotch Hotch, there's a Hotch Hotcher bee watcher whose job is to watch. To keep both his eyes on the lazy town bee. A bee that is watched will work harder, you see. Well, he watched and he watched, but in spite of his watch, that bee didn't work any harder. Not much. So then somebody said our old bee-watching man just isn't bee-watching as hard as he can. He ought to be watched by another Hotch-Hotcher. The thing that we need is a bee-watcher-watcher. Well, the bee-watcher watched the bee-watcher. He didn't watch well, so another Hotch-Hotcher had to come in and as a watcher-watcher. And today all the Hotchers who live in Hotch Hotch are watching on watching watch. A watching on the watching the watcher who's watching that bee. You're not a hotch-hotcher, you're lucky, you see. And how fortunate you're not Professor DeBreeze, who has spent the past 32 years, if you please, trying to teach Irish ducks how to read Givanese. And think of the poor puffing Hoogle-born players who have to parade down the Pooglehorn stairs every morning to wake up the Prince of Pooboken. It's awful how often their poogles get broken. And oh, just suppose you are poor Herbie Haddo. Try as he will, he just can't make a shadow. He thinks that perhaps something's wrong with his giz. And I guess that by golly, there probably is. And the brothers Bazoo, those poor brothers Bazoo, suppose your hair grew as theirs happened to do. You think you're unlucky, I'm telling you, ducky, some people are muchly, oh ever so muchly more unlucky than you. And suppose that you lived in a forest in France where the average person just hasn't a chance to escape from the perilous pants-eating plants. But your pants are safe, you're a fortunate guy. You ought to be shouting, how lucky am I? And speaking of plants, you should be greatly gladdish. You're not Farmer Falconbird's 17th radish. And you're so lucky you're not Gucky Gown, who lives by himself 90 miles out of town, in the ruins of Ronk. Ronk is rather run down. And you're so lucky you're not a left sock, left behind by mistake, in the caverns of Croc. Thank goodness for all of the things that you're not. Thank goodness you're not something someone forgot and left all alone in some punkerish place, like a rusty coat hanger, hanging in space. That's why I say, ducky, don't grumble, don't stew. Some critters are much, oh ever so much, oh muchly much more unlucky than you. About Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss really is a real person. His name is Theodore Seuss Geisel, and that's what he was mostly known as growing up in Springfield, Massachusetts. And through his years at Dartmouth and Oxford, he'd always planned to be a teacher, but somehow he was always too busy, all doing funny drawings for various newspapers and magazines. But because someday he was going to be a serious teacher, he signed the funny drawings Dr. Seuss. Then in 1937 he wrote a children's book. At first no one would publish it, but finally somebody did. And he signed it that Dr. Seuss. Luckily for children, Dr. Seuss has never had any more trouble getting his books published. Not content with inventing marvellous new kinds of animals, Dr. Seuss decided to invent a marvellous new kind of book. In 1957 he wrote The Cat in the Hat and proved that even books for beginning readers could be fun. The cat became the symbol for beginner books, a division of Random House, with Dr. Seuss as its president and editor-in-chief. He had become a teacher at last, showing millions of children the delights of learning to read. Dr. Seuss lives in an old watchtower on top of a mountain in California, where he keeps busy writing, drawing, and working on a series of award-winning TV specials. Sometimes he comes down off the mountain to visit other mountains or to go to the dentist. Thank you, Dr. Seuss.